What if the person you feared most was already living above you? They heard footsteps, but they lived alone. It started as a whisper in the attic. Then tools vanished. Then tracks in the snow led to the house. But never away. And just 6 days later, 6 people would be slaughtered. Gröbern Farm, Hinterkaifeck, 1922. Bavaria, Germany. Isolated. Remote. A mile from the nearest neighbor. Andreas Gröbern stood outside the barn that evening, squinting into the trees, snow up to his ankles, a shovel tight in his hand. He had just found footprints. Deep, deliberate, leading from the forest, straight to the house. But none leaving. His hands trembled. His wife, Cecilia, told him it was probably nothing. Their granddaughter, 7-year-old Clara, was playing with the animals. She hadn't noticed her doll was missing from the windowsill. But Andreas felt it. Something wasn't right. The air was thick, too still, like the silence after a scream. I told him not to go back in, the neighbor would later say. But Andreas, he wasn't the kind to be scared of shadows. That night they heard the attic creak again. Slow, dragging footsteps, almost like someone crawling. Andreas searched it with a lantern. Nothing. But Cecilia swore she saw something behind the rafters. A face. Watching. They didn't speak about it the next morning. But when Andreas went to feed the cows, he didn't return. Clara's mother, Victoria, followed into the barn. She found blood. She screamed, ran back inside, but someone had already cut the phone lines, and the door slowly shut behind her. Victoria had begged her father to move. She said she felt watched, even inside the house, but no one believed her. Not then. The priest had come once. He said the air in the home felt troubled. He didn't return a second time. They thought it was over. Just paranoia. A broken mind trying to escape grief. But someone was already inside. Not just in their home. Living there. Hiding between the walls. Sleeping in the attic. Watching them. And he had waited for the perfect moment to kill them all. By the time the mailman arrived that Monday, the family dog barked endlessly from behind the gate, blood pooling under the barn door. But no one came out to greet him, because they were already dead, and the killer was still there. What if your entire family vanished, but the house stayed warm, the animals fed, the meals cooked? What if someone was still living there, after the murders? Because when investigators entered Hinterkaifeck farm, the killer was long gone, but it felt like he'd never left. It was March 31st, 1922. Snow still covered the ground, melting into silence. The mailman trudged up the winding dirt path, expecting Andreas to wave him down like usual. But this time, no one greeted him. The dog barked, paws bloodied from clawing at the barn door. Flies buzzed near the cracks in the wood. Still, the house looked normal. Chimney smoke curled into the cold Bavarian air. The livestock were fed. Even the cows had been milked. But no footsteps, no voices, no one, except the sound of dripping from somewhere deep inside the barn. Victoria's hands had been tied behind her back. Her eyes still open, not in shock, but in recognition. She had known her killer. The wound on her skull split clean through the bone. A pickaxe, blunt, rusted, and left just inches from where she fell. Near her lay her daughter, Clara, face turned toward her mother, mouth slightly open, as if whispering her name. In death. When officers from nearby Schrobenhausen arrived 2 days later, they found what the mailman feared: 6 corpses hidden beneath hay in the barn. The killer had lured them one by one. First Andreas, then his wife, Cecilia, then Victoria and little Clara, all killed with the same tool, same method, same force, directly to the head. In the house, 2 more bodies waited. Young Joseph, Victoria's 2-year-old son, murdered in his cot, and the maid, Maria Baumgartner, her first day on the job. She hadn't even unpacked. Just a week earlier, the previous maid had quit. She told the neighbors the house was haunted. She said she heard whispers coming from the attic. Keys had gone missing. The family dismissed it, but she packed and left anyway. The Gröbers hired Maria the next day. She arrived with her suitcase, smiled politely, ate dinner with the family, and by sunrise she was dead. Inside the attic, police found a small indentation in the hay. Fresh. Someone had been sleeping there. Next to it, half-eaten food, a rusted lantern, a newspaper that the Gröbers didn't subscribe to. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors were all locked. The only tracks in the snow led into the farm, and none ever led out. Whoever did this was already there. The barn still smelled of blood and old straw. Every beam seemed to creak louder. In the corner, Victoria's scarf was nailed to the post, twisted like a noose. A child's rattle had been crushed underfoot. Joseph's crib still warm. Maria's suitcase sat untouched. A letter inside it never mailed. The house is colder than I thought. But they seem kind. No valuables were stolen. No signs of robbery. Nothing missing, except their lives. But why? The townspeople whispered that Victoria had a secret. A relationship no one talked about. A man who came around only at night. And sometimes, she left her bedroom window open, even in the cold. Was it love or fear? Had she let the killer in? Or had he never left? The bodies were taken, the tools bagged, the house sealed. But weeks later, neighbors claimed they still saw smoke from the chimney. The cattle fed, the dog let out, and a candle flickering in the attic window. Long after the murders, he said he'd seen a man standing in the attic window. But when they searched, no one was there, just shadows and the sound of breathing that wasn't their own. And when they looked for footprints in the snow, there were none, not one. Whoever had lived in that house wasn't walking like the rest of us. 2 weeks before the murders, a stranger arrived in the nearby town of Gröbern. Quiet, wore a gray coat, collar always pulled high, never smiled. He said his name was Lorenz. The townsfolk didn't ask many questions. They rarely did back then. But one man remembered him. A barber. He said Lorenz came in one night near closing, asked to borrow a razor, not for shaving, but for cutting rope. He left with nothing but a stare and a whisper. Some knots can't be undone. Once tightened. Victoria had been a schoolteacher once. She sang in the church choir. Widowed young. A life carved by loss. But behind the hymns and polite smiles, there was something darker. She often disappeared at dusk, into the woods behind the farm. Once, a neighbor's son followed. He said he saw her hand something through the trees. A letter, maybe money. But when asked, Victoria only said, "I was praying." Her diary told a different story. Police found it under a loose floorboard, pages missing, others stained with ink and panic. He says he loves Joseph like his own. One entry read, "But I wake to footsteps. I think he's watching us sleep." Was Lorenz the father? Or something worse? Andreas forbade Victoria from speaking to outsiders. She had once been locked in the cellar for defying him. Still, she wrote, "He comes when it rains. He hides when it's quiet. He said the attic feels like home." One farmer, Hans Meyer, said he saw candlelight in the attic weeks before the murders, even when the family was away. Another, Frau Huber, claimed she heard someone whispering her name as she passed the edge of the woods. A whisper that sounded like two voices, speaking at once. The night before the murders, Lorenz was seen again, standing outside the inn, head tilted, mouth moving, but no sound. When asked what he was doing, he said, "Waiting for the last light to go out." The police grew desperate. They searched the attic again, this time more carefully. What they found was worse than before. A nest of hay, child-sized footprints, a dull knife hidden in a shoe, but still no way in. No door unlocked, no windows cracked, no footprints in the snow. How did he get in? Unless he never left. Chief Inspector George Reingruber refused to rule out supernatural causes. Not because he believed in ghosts, but because every logical answer led to madness. No prints, no break-ins, no noise until the screams. It was as if the killer had bent reality itself. twisted time, lived between the floorboards. Or maybe someone on the inside let him in. A young boy named Felix had been sent to deliver eggs to the farm a month before the killings. He said Clara, the 7-year-old, pulled him aside. She whispered, "Don't go upstairs. The man in the roof doesn't like boys." No one believed him, not until after the bodies were found. Felix said he saw the same man days later, in the woods, just standing, not blinking, watching the house. But when Felix led his father back, the man was gone. No tracks, no signs, just a muddy shoe print on the roof of the chicken coop. The police questioned Lorenz. He denied everything, said he didn't know Victoria well, said he'd never been near the farm. But when they searched his belongings, they found a small pocketknife and a photo of Joseph, folded, torn, with a single word scrawled on the back. "Mine." Still, they had no evidence, no witnesses, no confession, and so he walked free. The house was torn down months later, but workers claimed they heard footsteps above them as they stripped the beams. The attic was empty, but the boards were warm, and beneath one floor panel, a child's drawing, stick figures, one with no face, and above it scrawled in tiny, jagged letters, "He still lives here." The priest tried to warn them, but no one listened. He said the land was cursed, that something watched from the rafters. Weeks before the murders, he stopped his sermon mid-sentence and whispered, "There is something ungodly on that farm." No one asked him what he meant, because no one ever saw him again. St. Johannes Church, March 12, 1922. The morning was colder than usual. Victoria stood in the front pew, hands clasped too tightly. She didn't sing, didn't kneel, just stared at the altar. Behind it stood Father Matthias Huber, 52 years old, soft-spoken, well-respected. Until that day, he opened the Book of Psalms, flipped to page 91, then froze. His lips moved, but no words came. He dropped the Bible, looked toward Victoria, and said, almost like a whisper, "You shouldn't go back there." Everyone thought he meant the house, but his voice was shaking like he meant the attic. 3 days before the sermon, Victoria had visited him late at night. He recorded it in his private journal. She knocked thrice, hair wet from rain, eyes bruised, not from violence, but terror. She told him something was watching her sleep, that she heard her name spoken, not from a mouth, but from the walls. She said her father wouldn't listen, that someone was in the attic. And once, just once, she saw him, not fully, just the shape. "It had no eyes," she said, "but I felt it looking at me." After the murders, the new priest cleaned out the old chambers. Tucked beneath the altar floorboards, he found a cloth-wrapped journal. Its pages were yellowed, smelled of wax and incense. Inside were sketches, a shadow with long arms, a figure hunched above a family in bed, and in one corner, the Hinterkaifeck farm. Father Matthias had drawn it weeks before the massacre, and beneath it, scrawled in frantic ink, "The sins of the father awaken the man in the attic." Locals thought Father Matthias had gone mad. Some whispered he'd joined a cult. Others said he'd vanished into the woods. But a visiting bishop later revealed something chilling. Matthias had once performed an unofficial exorcism at Hinterkaifeck when Victoria was just 12. He wrote, "The girl did not speak, but the house screamed for her." There was something buried, and it was not only in the ground. But no records exist, no church documents, only his handwriting and the fear it left behind. A neighbor recalled visiting the farm a year before the murders. He had heard the attic creak, even though no one had gone upstairs. He told Andreas. Andreas laughed. So the man left. But as he walked away, he swore the windows on the top floor blinked. He said it felt like the house had seen him, and didn't like it. Weeks later, investigators found a grave behind the farm. Unmarked, shallow. Inside, no coffin, no bones, just torn fabric and teeth. Not animal. Human. Old. And wrapped in the fabric. A piece of parchment, water-damaged and scorched. One line remained legible. He was not born, he was returned. Victoria's old teacher came forward with something she'd hidden for decades. A letter Victoria wrote at age 16. It read, "I can hear him whisper. Not Papa. Not Joseph's father. The other one. The one from above. I think I brought him here when I broke the promise. But no one knows what that promise was." And when they asked the teacher why she hid the letter, she said, "Because I saw the attic too." To this day, no one knows what the priest saw, what he heard, or why he never returned. But his final sermon was found on the pulpit. Just 4 words, written in shaking ink. "The attic is listening." The postmark was dated April 4th, 5 days after they were murdered. But the handwriting was Victoria's. Inside the sealed envelope, a confession. One that would destroy everything the investigators thought they knew, and force them to ask one question no one wanted to hear. What if the killer was family? It arrived quietly. No return address. No postage due. Just there. At the desk of Inspector Reingruber in Munich. At first, he thought it was a prank. A cruel one. But then he saw the handwriting. The tight curves. The way she curled her J. It matched Victoria's school applications. Perfectly. But she had been dead for 5 days. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting. No farewell. Only this. "If you're reading this, it means I failed. I couldn't protect them. I tried to keep him hidden. But the house wouldn't let him go." The ink was smudged in places. Water damage, maybe. Or tears. She wrote about a man she called the Quiet One. She claimed he wasn't born. He was made. Not by her. Not by Andreas. But by the house. "He wears the shape of someone I love," she wrote. "But his voice isn't his." Months earlier, Victoria had written a formal request to the postmaster, asking to reroute her mail to a P.O. box under a false name. Amelia Voss. The same alias once used by her mother before marrying Andreas. Why would she do that? Because Victoria was hiding something. Not just a relationship, a lineage. The letter continued, "Joseph isn't his. Not really. He just thinks he is. It's all he talks about now. How Joseph looks like him. How the attic feels like home. He says he remembers being here before. But I never saw him as a child. I don't know what he is anymore." 15 years later, long after the case went cold, an aging postmaster finally came forward. Said the letter was dropped off. By a woman. Dark shawl. Eyes red. He said she looked like Victoria, but older. Broken. She never spoke. Just handed him the envelope and left. He remembered the smell of hay, and something else. Something rotten. She walked like she'd been in hiding, he said. Like something was still watching her. After receiving the letter, Inspector Reingruber ordered a second search of the attic. This time they found more. Under a floorboard, a rusted can. Inside, children's teeth, tied together with wire. And a photograph, blurry, faded. 6 people in front of the Hinterkaifeck home, but only 5 were identified. The 6th? A boy. I scratched out. Standing on the roof. The letter spirals by the end. I thought locking him in would help. I stopped feeding him. I nailed the door shut. He still found a way out. He waits until we sleep. He touches their heads while they dream. He says Joseph will be like him soon. No signature. Just a final line, written hastily across the bottom margin. If someone finds us, burn the attic first. Months after the house was demolished, locals claimed they still heard sounds coming from the empty field. Whispers, creaks, a lullaby that Victoria once sang in church, but sung backwards. Children said they saw someone standing on the edge of where the house once stood. Not moving, not blinking, just waiting. If Victoria wrote the letter, how did she send it after her death? If it wasn't her, who had her handwriting? Her thoughts? Her guilt? Was she trying to warn them? Or Was it a final manipulation? And who was the quiet one she kept writing about? Inspector Gruber retired not long after. He never solved the case, never cracked the mystery, but before he left his post, he placed Victoria's letter in a sealed archive, along with a single note of his own. One of them lived long after the rest were buried. The house was gone, demolished, but the attic still echoed. A worker screamed during cleanup, begging to be pulled out of the wreckage. He said he saw a face in the rubble, one that didn't move, but was watching. The others said he imagined it. But that night, he slit his own throat and carved one word into the wall before he died. Above, it was supposed to bring closure, tear the whole thing down, wipe the slate clean. The Hinterkaifeck farmhouse, abandoned and rotting, stood for 12 months, untouched since the police left. Now it was being torn apart. 6 men, hammers, chains, cigarettes burning with nervous fingers. None of them wanted to go upstairs, but they were told, burn the attic beams first, just like the note in Victoria's letter had warned. They didn't die peacefully, not even quickly. The coroner said Victoria's fingers were broken from clawing at the barn floor. Cazilia, the grandmother, had tufts of hair ripped out by her own hands. Clara's face was still twisted mid-scream, frozen in terror. And yet, every time someone tried to explain what happened, it all unraveled. Too clean, too calculated, too present. As if the killer wasn't gone. As if he was still there, beneath the wood inside the walls. Waiting. They started with the roof. Easier access. No one wanted to enter through the front door. The second they pried the attic beam loose, the man holding the crowbar fell backward, sobbing. He said he heard a child's voice, right behind his ear. It whispered, "I never left." They laughed at first, blamed the wind, blamed the pressure. But when they cracked open the southern wall, they found a cavity between the beams, a space no wider than a coffin. Inside it, a rusted tin plate, fresh crumbs, a strip of cloth, and scratch marks, dozens, deep, bloody, frenzied. Something or someone had lived there, not just days, not weeks, years. His name was Dieter Schall. He was 31, strong, quiet, the kind of man who didn't scare easily. Until that day, he crawled inside the attic alone to tear out the final beam, the one directly above where Joseph's crib had been. 5 minutes passed, 10. Then a scream, not from fear, from sheer panic. He tore through the insulation, scratching at the floor, face contorted like something was inside him. He kept repeating, "It blinked." There were no eyes, but it blinked. They dragged him out. He was shaking, inconsolable. By nightfall, he had vanished from the crew's cabin. By morning, they found him miles away, in the ruins of the local chapel, throat torn, barely alive, and scrawled on the chapel wall, with his own blood. Above, after demolition, the workers left the site untouched. But locals began reporting strange things. The field where the house once stood, birds refused to land on it. Animals wouldn't go near. One child went missing nearby, found hours later in the exact footprint of the farmhouse, standing where the attic had been. She was humming, and when asked what she was doing, she said, "He wanted to show me his room." The most disturbing part? Paranormal investigators would later claim that the attic never left. Even without walls, beams, or floorboards, something still lingered in the space above. Every photo taken above the site came out smudged, as if someone's hand had dragged across the lens. Every drone footage, distorted. One even showed a faint outline, a shadow figure, hovering where the ceiling used to be. Eyes not visible, but glowing all the same. Decades passed, but the trauma bled into new generations. The town refused to speak of the Gröbers, of the attic, of the man with no name. But at the local museum, behind a locked case, a worker once found a folded piece of cloth tucked inside an exhibit drawer. It was small, stained, smelled of soot. Inside it, A note. The house was never haunted. The family was. To this day, nothing grows on the footprint where Hinterkaifeck once stood. Not grass, not moss, not even weeds. People walk around it, never across it, even though nothing is physically there. But if you listen, on quiet nights, you'll hear it. A whisper, a creak, a weight shifting. The attic never sleeps. The attic held secrets. But the face behind the rafters was something no one expected. Not a stranger, not a ghost, but someone they knew, someone they trusted. Because the real horror of Hinterkaifeck wasn't the murder. It was who was watching, and for how long. It came from the belongings of Clara's surviving cousin, a small photo album wrapped in twine, discovered in 1952, tucked in the attic of another farmhouse miles away. Inside, family portraits, most faded, some water-damaged, but one photo was untouched. The Gröbern family standing outside the barn, all 6 of them, smiling, alive. But in the window above, just over Victoria's shoulder, a face, partially hidden, not smiling, just watching. And not just watching them, watching us. You see, Andreas Gröbern had a brother, long estranged, institutionalized for a violent outburst when they were boys, declared unfit, vanished from record in 1898. But a clerk's log surfaced during a property audit in 1948, and it had only one note under his name. Released. No known address. Name changed to Lorenz S., the same Lorenz who lived in town, who no one knew much about, who kept to himself, who was seen near the farm in the days before the murder. The one Victoria was seen passing notes to, the man she may have thought was her uncle, or worse, her protector. In her diary she described him as the man who stood outside the woods when she was just 9. He gave her candy, told her not to tell her father, told her she was special, that she could see what others couldn't. He said the house needed her, that the attic was hers to inherit. Was it grooming, manipulation, madness passed through blood? Or was Victoria just a child, left to make sense of something unspeakable? When workers cleared the last of the rubble from the burned farm, they found something buried deep beneath the kitchen floor. A hidden door, long sealed shut. Inside, a journal, and a body, mummified, dressed in old farm clothes, missing its jaw. But next to it, a locket. Inside the locket, picture of Victoria, and scrawled behind it, scratched by fingernail. She was never supposed to leave me. The journal was full of symbols, scribbled rants, but also meticulous records of the family's movements. What they ate, when they left the house, when they laughed, when they cried. Joseph cries differently when he knows I'm watching. It read, he looks just like I did. He knows. Her last entries turned frantic, scribbled in the margins. She wasn't writing to herself anymore. She was writing to someone inside the house. I hear you at night. You breathe when I do. You mimic my steps. You want Joseph, don't you? If I die first, don't take him. Don't take him too. It was her final fight. A mother's fear not of ghosts, but of something worse. A legacy. A dark inheritance passed not through will, but through trauma. The burn site was never redeveloped. But the police returned once more in 1964, after a string of anonymous letters were delivered to Victoria's last known relative. Each one written in perfect cursive. Each envelope containing the same chilling message. It's quiet now, but the attic remembers. When they investigated, they found something buried under the footprint of where the attic once stood. Toy, wooden, hand-carved, with the name Joseph etched into it, and a second name scratched violently beneath. Lorenz. In the end, it wasn't the attic that was haunted. It wasn't the house. It wasn't even the land. It was the people. The secrets passed between generations. The silence that rotted louder than screams. Because sometimes, a monster doesn't come from the outside. It grows from within. And it wears the face of someone you once trusted. It stands behind rafters, learns your rhythms, studies your steps, until it becomes you. So what do you think? Was this the work of a killer hiding in the walls, or a family haunted by its own reflection? Was Lorenz ever real, or just the attic's way of making sure no one ever left? Comment your thoughts below. Was this a ghost, or something much worse? And if you want more stories that crawl under your skin and stay there, subscribe to the Veil of Secret. We have plenty more truths still hidden behind walls.